Welcome back to Conservative Conversations. I am Reid.
And I'm Frank.
Today we're going to be talking about Trump defunds NPR and PBS and proposes reopening Alcatraz. So let's get started. But before we do, I'd like to remind you to follow us on your favorite podcast platform and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also become a paid subscriber through our podcast host Red Circle to access exclusive content. Alright, so to get started, one of the first topics we got is President Trump has signed an executive order to, I believe it's remove federal funding from PBS and NPR, which we have talked about related issues before about how they receive so much federal tax dollars, and people question why we are even doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of questions. I mean, people have a lot of mixed feelings about this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know, we all grew up watching PBS in a manner of speaking, and we've all listened to NPR. You know, there's certain programs I like, to be honest with you. But I don't know that, you know, my taxes should have to pay for it.
Right.
You know, I mean, I sort of have that fundamental belief anyway. I think if you want to interact in the marketplace, then you should pay for it. Maybe you should pay to watch PBS, you know, instead of being forced to pay for PBS.
Right. Well, I mean, one of the things I've mentioned before when we talked about this is, like, what is the real need for the government to even be giving them money? Like, I mean, if they go out of business because of, you know, taxpayer dollars aren't going to them, well, is that terrible? I mean, you got free news everywhere. Radio is free. You don't need money to turn on your FM or AM radio other than, you know, to be able to buy the radio. But otherwise, it's free. I mean, so what? I don't see, like, if there were no free radio stations and the government was providing this service to people, I think that'd be a little more reasonable. But I just don't think it has a place anymore. I mean, the stations do. I mean, it's the federal funding that I'm not sure really has a place anymore.
Well, sort of like the whole model, you might say, just needs to be evaluated. And that's probably what's being asked for here is, like, I wouldn't be surprised if they still end up with some federal funding at the end of this, but
Sure.
I think it's interesting just to go through. I got a couple of facts on it. So it's been this way, the way it is now, since 1967. And the, whatever it is, the CPB, I can't think of what it is, like the Central something broadcast, I can't think of what it is right now, but that's when it officially started. It was with the CPB, and their original mission was to ensure universal access to non-commercial, high-quality content and telecommunication services. So I kind of get that, maybe. I don't know.
Right.
There wasn't a lot of programming back then. There were, like, 2-3 main channels that people had, and then, so I mean, I could understand some sort of community outreach, child care, childhood, early education programming, and that kinds of stuff, and providing an alternative to the two, you know, main programs that were out there. I mean, some of this I think maybe made sense at one point in time, but I think you have to ask now, I mean, is that what we're getting today? Are they still living up to this charter? Are we getting non-commercial, high-quality content? I don't think so.
Right.
I think it's filled with commercials, silliness, garbage. A lot of it's garbage programming. It's not high-quality content anymore.
Right.
Now, it's not to say every program that they have on there is not, you know, is low quality or not high quality, but I think the reason people really, I mean, you see this with almost everything, but once the government gets their tentacles into something, this is the part, my next fact is the part that I think people really freak out about, though, is because 70%, this is according to Wikipedia, 70% of its funding is distributed to more than 1,400 locally owned stations.
Right.
So that is going to have an impact at the community level.
Right.
But I just also think that's interesting because, you know, I'll go back to the high quality point again. Because I don't think you see, even on the local level, high quality stuff being generated.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it operates just like the Associated Press, where they all just sort of parrot, you know, what the people higher up the chain, what the people in New York are broadcasting.
Right.
So it's more like just a Project Mockingbird type of operation, you know? They just echo and parrot what the last person said. It's not original. It's not high quality. So I think it's probably well needed, I would say.
Right. I'd be curious to see, like, how much money could these local stations potentially get if they were locally funded? Because if all this money is coming from the federal government, I mean, how many hands does the tax dollar have to pass through before it gets to these stations?
Yeah.
And everybody's going to want their little piece of it.
Right.
So, I mean, something that happened to pop into my head when you mentioned
how
much
I think
of this
it's
goes
interesting.
to local stations.
Yeah. Well, I just knew that there'd be a huge outcry for it. I mean, this is something I've done tangentially. I've known radio people. I've worked in the newspaper business before, not radio, but it's somewhat similar. When you work around guys who are in those fields, sometimes they trade back and forth. One will do radio, you know, maybe they'll have a column in a paper, whatever. It kind of sort of goes back and forth. But I knew that there'd be a big shakeup. You know, I know people personally right here in the Columbus area who would be upset with this. But when I saw the little tidbit that the CEOs of NPR and PBS are suing the Trump administration, well, that to me says everything, because do you think they're doing it for their employees?
No, they'd probably be doing it to make sure they still get the money.
Bingo, bango. I mean, they're doing it to protect their interests. That's why they're getting so personally involved. Now, I'm sure they wouldn't say so. Sure, it's for their companies, their people, their assets. Sure, but I don't know.
Right. Yeah, I mean, going back to how it affects local people, I mean, even in West Virginia, well, there's I think it's the local station that's in Charleston. They have every Sunday Mountain Stage. It's like
that's a good program.
Yeah, I mean, it's music. I think it varies what kind of music they have, but it's live music that's performed right in Charleston.
Yeah, Kathy Mateo's been doing a lot of that, I think. Hasn't she been the lead on there? She was for a while anyway. It might have been last year.
I couldn't tell you. I mean, so yeah, I definitely understand how people would be, you know, upset on a more local basis, because there definitely are people who do enjoy some of the programs that NPR or PBS put out there.
But I think you'd see, I mean, you know how a free market works. Those programs don't have to be eradicated. We're talking about changing the funding structure, really. So,
right. I mean, if any of the programs are legitimately good, companies can buy the rights to those and distribute them that way.
Well, and I think it's interesting, you know, because a lot of people, I'll just piggyback on that. I don't want to stay on this topic all day or anything, but, you know, a lot of people associate PBS with Sesame Street.
Right.
And I'll show you, it's funny, the opposite example of that is here you have Sesame Street as like a pop icon, you know, in the zeitgeist of American culture. But look, it didn't work for PBS. They sold it off to HBO, like, I don't know, 10 years ago or something like that. It hasn't been a PBS thing for a while. Now, they still can run reruns,
right?
But they don't do original Sesame Street production anymore. That moved to HBO. And now HBO has it up for sale because it's not a profitable show anymore.
Yeah, that makes sense.
When I just wanted to throw that out there. I mean, maybe our listeners might find that interesting, but still, when you turn on certain programs, you're going to hear people saying, "Oh, you can't get rid of Sesame Street. PBS doesn't have anything to do with Sesame Street anymore."
Yeah, the Republicans want to kill Big Bird. Yeah.
Well, no, HBO wants to kill Big Bird.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how these lawsuits play out. If the court will uphold the executive order or action. I don't know which one it technically is. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yep, it will. Well, to move on, I mean, Trump just did a 60-minute interview.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I can't remember the chick's name that he sat with, but it was the same chick. He sat with her just a few months back for 60 minutes, too. So she's been interviewing him a couple times now. But he said some interesting things in that. He gave an update. I guess he's supposed to sit down with that new Prime Minister of Canada, pretty soon.
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of that guy's name either right now.
Didn't
write very good notes for this, I guess, but he's still talking about Canada becoming the 51st state.
Yeah.
Which I just think is hilarious. I mean, he's got to just be trying to get under that guy's skin.
Yeah, probably. I think so.
I don't know how else to take it. But he also talked about Greenland again and about how he wouldn't rule out military force for Greenland, which is interesting. But, if you look at our history with Greenland, it's always been military. So
right.
I sort of get where he's coming from. But, they try to make it sound like he is going to send tanks over there and take it by force. I don't think that's exactly what he's talking about. But then one of the cooler things that I've seen, and I don't know if it came out of the 60 Minutes interview or if it was afterwards, but he's talking about opening up Alcatraz Island, the old federal prison out there in San Francisco Bay, which I think is so cool. How do you feel about that? I mean, the thing's been closed for 60 years.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. I like to see how they would do it, because what I've heard is part of the reason why it was shut down because it costs so much to run the place.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine it's any cheaper now. I mean, I suppose it could be, after, upfront costs of technology, they have like more cameras and things like that that can help reduce the amount of people you have around. But still, I don't see how it's going to be any cheaper than in the past, if that's one of the reasons why we stopped using it.
Well, I don't know. Maybe we just need to look at that too, because maybe you just bulldoze the whole thing and just call it Fight Island. We can turn it into a TV show where, maybe you just have drone cameras that watch the island, and maybe they just stand around all exposed to the elements, and then maybe they fight each other, or they who knows.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding, of course. I wouldn't want to see anybody treated that inhumanely, but I wouldn't be surprised. Trump's a builder guy, so I wouldn't be surprised if they just dozed it and built something cheaper, more, sort of like a IKEA type jail.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't think it's completely unreasonable. I mean, if we have a plan to deport, billion of people that are not supposed to be here, we gotta have somewhere to put them if their countries aren't going to take them back willingly.
Yeah, or if we're forced to give them these extended trials that just get delayed and delayed and delayed, and they have to be, contained somewhere in the meantime.
Yeah.
It's probably cheaper to fly them to the San Francisco Bay than it is to Guantanamo Bay.
Right.
I would think. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but
I guess it depends on where they are.
Yeah, but I mean, we do need more space.
Mm-hmm.
And I love, if you go and listen to the quote, what Trump said is, he said, it's a symbol. That's what Alcatraz is a symbol.
Right.
And he said it's a sort of a bad symbol. It's a symbol of law and order, is what it is. And in that regard, I think he's so right. That's what he's got right about this. Now, you're right to talk about the funding and all that. I mean, gosh, I don't want to pay. They said it was 3 times more expensive than the next most expensive jail at the time when they shut it down.
Wow.
So, yeah, that's crazy. I would have been on team shut down Alcatraz back then if I would have heard that.
Right.
But now, I think you could probably look at it. There are probably ways you could do it cheaper.
Right.
You could probably
Right, I mean, because it's not like the place is completely unutilized right now. It's a tourist attraction.
Oh, it's like, I think it's the top tourist attraction in California right now.
Yeah, it's like 1 million people a year visit that place. I mean, so it's obviously has some infrastructure to it still if they let people go over there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think it can make some sense to refix it or fix it up and put it to use.
Well, and I'll also just mention this. This is not news related in any way, shape, or form, but when Trump says that it's a symbol, I think that's so cool because Alcatraz was the inspiration for. I mean, did I just say? Oh yeah, Alcatraz. Mm-hmm. Alcatraz was the inspiration for Azkaban in the Harry Potter series, which is where I just think that's so cool. I mean, it's such a famous icon of a prison establishment that J.K. Rowling used it, as in the wizarding world. They had an island called Azkaban that it was their most top high security prison. So I don't know. I just think it's cool, and it is cool as a symbol and a part of American history. And why does it just need to be a museum?
Right. Well, maybe you use half of it for a museum to help fund it, and the other half you stick some
There you go.
Yeah.
I don't know, though. Would you want to put 1 million tourists a year around our most high security prisoners?
I mean, I don't know. It depends on how secure they are.
Yeah, I don't know.
You just up the fee and say, it's help cover liability.
But it'll be interesting to see what comes of that.
Right.
And I just love, as one last little comment on that topic, this is what I love about Trump. He just says this crazy stuff, and then, is it madness or is it genius?
Right. Well, I mean, I heard somebody say that Nancy Pelosi's comment on it was that it's not serious. Mm-hmm. And my first thought was, how do you know?
Yeah.
How do you know if he's legitimately being serious about it or not?
Yeah.
Because he just might try to do it. That's the kind of guy that Trump is. And I'll have one last comment for it related to you talking about how it's a symbol.
Yeah.
It's almost like it's this big symbol of a deterrent. Like,
yeah,
you don't want to go there. So
absolutely, yeah.
Try not to break the law. Try not to come here illegally. Or whatever the case might be.
Right.
Because you don't want to go to Alcatraz.
Well, and I think that's what he means. And I know Trump sometimes plays these games, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's actually got something else up his sleeve, but he's just floating this idea to see how people react to it.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, well, they really hated that idea. They probably won't care when I turn Area 51 into a prison.
Yeah. That'd be interesting.
Hey, I said it first, so when you hear it on the news, it was first here on contemporaryconservative.net.
That's right. Yeah.
Gosh.
But yeah, that's I'm curious to see what comes of that idea, just like many of Trump's others.
But what else? You told me about something else he's proposing for tariffs.
Oh, yes. Yeah, another thing that's making some headlines today as we're recording is Donald Trump wants to put 100% tariff on foreign-made films because he thinks our movie industry is being robbed. And there are some production companies have gone over to the Netherlands or somewhere over in Europe, or they go to other places other than California. California used to be the spot, but now it's become so expensive. The actor Rob Lowe, you familiar with him?
Yeah, I know Rob Lowe.
He's complained about it recently.
Well, and I heard, not only movies, but a lot of podcasting and a lot of marketing and a lot of stuff is moving to Texas. I've heard that's, Texas is sort of getting a lot more of that business now.
Right.
But it does make sense that they'd probably go just wherever it was cheapest.
Right. But it is interesting to think about how you going to exactly tariff a movie as it's imported into our country. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. And one of the claims that I think is a little silly myself is that he wants to do it for national security purposes or reasons, which I don't know if the movie industry is that high on the national security priority list.
I would say not, but
Right,
I don't
but
know.
I don't know if
What do I know?
if that's his justification for it. I mean, that's what it is.
Well, I do think it's interesting because I think you'd see, hopefully it is an attempt like with other things, like in manufacturing and,
just bring it back
along
home.
with his, to repatriate some of this. But I don't really know what it would do, though, because when I think to myself, what kinds of films do I watch? I don't watch movies from Bollywood or
Right.
Europe. How many European films do I sit around and watch? Probably not too many. I mean,
Right. Well, from my understanding, it's not like necessarily foreign films. It's even American films that are, I guess, made outside of America, which not all of a movie's production is done out, even in another country. And like, when it comes to the ending part, are you going to somehow tariff that? Or are you just going to tariff the portion that was like filmed in another country? So it is a bit strange to think about how that would all play out. But that's another one of his latest proposals that's making the headlines.
Somebody made a film about him a few years back, and he just happened to remember. He's like, oh, yeah, they think they can set up in the Netherlands, huh? Mm-hmm. I don't think so.
Yeah.
No, I'm just... Who knows? But it's probably just in this attempt to repatriate.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much how I take it. I mean, he wants as much possible to be American-made.
Yeah.
And that's just another facet of his plan and his goal.
Well, and no matter what, I mean, there's a lot of moving parts to that for sure, as we just talked about. So, but at least we know he's fighting for us. I mean, I'm sure he's not doing this for any other purpose.
Right. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I don't see what his big gain would be on a personal level for doing this. So, I don't know. It's like I say very often, it's interesting. So we'll see how it goes.
Well, and it also would be good. I mean, as much problems as California has, I mean, if they had more industry, more business, more people, more tax revenue, that's less that the federal government would have to give to California, yada, yada, yada. So it just sounds like a good thing to me, but what do I know? I'm just a small fish in a very big world.
Yeah. Yep. Well, do you have any other stories?
The only other thing I have is I just think it's interesting. It's a story we've talked about before, and I almost feel like it's beating a dead horse, but to me it's so comical that I keep tuning into these stories. But they keep talking about this, whether or not Joe Biden was demented there towards the end. And when did his mind start slipping, and how did you not know? And more people have been interviewed. I think the last time I talked about this story, it had been Liz Warren had made the headlines. Because a podcaster was pressing her and saying,
"Oh yes,
well, do you think that Joe Biden was as sharp as you?" And she just like balks. She makes this face almost to suggest like Joe Biden was never as bright as me, like she, but she doesn't say that.
Right.
But that was funny to me. And then in this one, there's been a big debate in this latest round that I was watching about the use of the phrase cover up. They keep debating whether or not his, sliding mental faculties was covered up, and who covered it up. Was it covered up by the administration? Was it covered up by the high ups in the leader, of the Democratic Party? Was it covered up by the media? And a lot of this, I've mentioned Jake Tapper's book before because I just think it's so rich that somebody like Jake Tapper would be doing a deep dive on the media's handling of, Joe Biden's declining mental state. But he's been out there making waves, and his latest thing, you'll have to find the clip. It'll be in the show notes if you want to find it. But he says it wasn't the media. No, it wasn't the media who covered up for Joe Biden. It was the Democrats. That's his new things. It was the Democrats. And he called them out specifically. He says it was Pelosi. It was Schumer. It was Jill Biden. It was Kamala Harris, etc. He named names. It was them. It's the politicians, not the media. The media didn't do anything. They're just these doughy-eyed school children, the media.
Yeah, they didn't miss the story.
No.
That's the word, miss the story. They didn't miss it.
And I just wanted to bring this up because, Jen Psaki, she's the latest Liz Warren. Now, she doesn't have a funny clip out of this, but she was being pressed because, she was Joe Biden's press secretary early on before she switched and became a news media host or whatever. And who's she with now? CBS or MSNBC? Yeah, MSNBC. But anyway, she was being pressed on this, and they were saying, well, Jen, didn't you notice anything? You were right there. Didn't you notice anything? And she's like, no, never. I didn't know anything until the debate night. But I love, there's this guy who does news and politics analysis. I think he's one of the best on the web. Don't walk, run. I've shouted him out before. But he points out right after this, this guy pressing Jen Psaki, did you notice anything? It was only 1 month after she left office that huge story broke about how he had those cards that directed him, you enter the room, you find your seat, you allow press to enter.
Right.
You give opening statements for about a minute, and he had to have these, and you could read it. The press got a beautiful shot of, he had all these, the stories started coming out, all these controlled, we saw how controlled it was when he went up trying to take questions from reporters. He's like, well, they told me to call on so-and-so, so.
I'll get in trouble if I don't.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's just sort of farcical, and you and I know that, and our audience would know that, but I just sort of wonder, how long is this story going to bubble on? It's just so sort of funny to see them pointing fingers back and forth. The media wants to blame the Democrats. The Democrats wants to blame the media. Everybody wants to blame Jill Biden. She should have done something.
Right.
I don't know. So,
well, I mean, the only question I would want to ask to Jake Tapper is, okay, maybe it was coming down from Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden that, to keep it all hush-hush. Well, where was Jake Tapper questioning the whole thing?
Exactly.
I mean, what are you talking about? You had nothing to do with it.
Well, and then, I'm glad you brought this up because not only that, but who was it? It was Trump's daughter-in-law, Laura Trump. He was interviewing her at one point, and she talked about Joe Biden's mental faculties, in a sense. She alluded to his problem. And Jake got all upset with her and said, he just used to have a stutter. You're just making fun of his stutter.
Right.
So he's even carried water for Joe Biden before. I mean, we've been calling it out the whole time. Listen, I'm not too proud to say it's not the nicest thing in the world to say about somebody who was our president, but Joe Biden was never that bright.
Right.
Ever. So the idea that he started slipping somewhere around his 70s is just sort of logical. I mean, plain as day. Let me put it that way. Plain as day. You had the Republicans calling it out. You had Trump calling it out.
Right.
And they were all deny, like they were lawyers.
Well, I wish I could cite where this comes from, but I've heard more than a couple times there's an infamous quote from Barack Obama. It's something along the lines of never underestimate the ability of Joe Biden to F things up.
Yep. That's right.
So, I mean, he sure did. And he sure didn't have the competency to to really be the president.
Well, and can I just tell you, here's my cherry on top, and we can be done with this if you'd like. But for me, the finger pointing back and forth, Democrats say it was the media. Media says it was the Democrats. There's no difference between the two.
Right. Yeah.
So there's my little soapbox. For Jake to make out like he's not a Democrat is
Right.
a joke.
Right. Totally. I mean, this, I don't know what it is I'm trying to say, but the funny part is, it's most people knew it the whole time.
Oh,
and
yeah.
they're still putting this.
It's just
trickling
politics.
Out these, these comments from these books as if it's revelatory somehow.
Yeah, I know. That's why it's like I said, I feel like I'm beating a dead horse, but it's so funny to watch them in such turmoil.
Yep. Right. All right. Well, is that all we got for our main topics?
Yep, that's all I got.
All right. Then we will do a quick extra topic. And if you would like to hear that, you can become a paid subscriber through our podcast host, Red Circle. And we would greatly appreciate your support. All right, listeners, that is all we got for today's show. So if you enjoyed what you have heard, please follow us on your favorite podcast platform and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can find us at Contemporary Conservative. Some of you may notice the channel name has changed, as I've been talking about. You can find us on Contemporary Conservative pretty much anywhere you want to hear us. We appreciate you becoming a paid subscriber through our podcast host, Red Circle, to hear additional content and some exclusive segments.
That's right, and we hope you might share us with a friend or two and encourage them to become paid subscribers so that they have access to the same bonus and exclusive content that you have access to. And as always, we thank you so much for listening.